The glass skyscraper of Sterling and Associates pierced the grey Manhattan skyline like a jagged needle. Inside, on the 42nd floor, the atmosphere was clinical and cold. Marcus Sterling, the CFO known in the financial world as the Iron Vault, adjusted his silk tie in the reflection of the mahogany conference table. He was a man of precision, schedules, and zero tolerance for disorder. Today, he was interviewing for a senior analyst position, a role that demanded perfection. "Next candidate," Marcus muttered, not looking up from his tablet. The heavy oak door creaked open, but the sound of clicking heels was replaced by the soft pitter-patter of worn-out sneakers. Marcus waited. When the silence stretched too long, he looked up, his brow furrowed in preparation for a reprimand. Instead, his breath caught. Standing at the end of the long table was a girl no older than 7. She wore a faded denim jacket that was 2 sizes too big and a pair of leggings with a small hole in the left knee. Her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, and her face, though smudged with the dust of the city, held a gaze so piercingly blue it felt like a physical weight. In her small, trembling hands she clutched a tattered manila folder. "Are you lost, kid?" Marcus asked, his voice losing some of its edge to sheer confusion. "The daycare center is on the 3rd floor. You shouldn't be up here." The girl took 3 steps forward, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "I'm not lost," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the slight quiver in her chin. "My mom has an appointment at 10 a.m., but she's in the hospital, so I came instead." Marcus felt a ripple of annoyance. This was a billion-dollar firm, not a charity. "Listen, sweetheart, I don't know who your mother is, but we don't do stand-ins. This is a hiring meeting for a high-level executive position. Now, where is your father? Who brought you here?" "I took the subway," she replied simply. "And I don't have a dad. It's just me and Mom. She worked 3 weeks on this." She stepped closer and placed the folder on the table. It was covered in coffee stains and bore the name Sarah Miller. Marcus recognized the name. Sarah Miller had been one of the top applicants on paper, a Harvard graduate who had mysteriously vanished from the corporate world 5 years ago. He had been curious about her. "She has pneumonia," the girl whispered, her eyes filling with sudden hot tears. "She didn't want to miss it. She said this was our last chance. If she doesn't get the job, we can't stay at the shelter anymore. They told us our time is up." The room felt suddenly very small. Marcus, a man who dealt only in numbers, found himself staring at a variable he couldn't calculate, the desperation of a child. He looked at the folder, then back at the girl. Outside, the New York wind rattled the windows, a reminder of the harsh winter settling over the city. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, his voice softening. "Maya," she replied, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "And I can tell you why she's the best. I helped her study the charts." Marcus looked at his watch. His next meeting was in 20 minutes. He should call security. He should find a social worker. But as he looked at Maya's determined face, he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity. "All right, Maya," Marcus said, leaning back. "You have 5 minutes. Tell me why Sarah Miller deserves to sit in this chair." Maya didn't hesitate. She climbed onto one of the heavy leather chairs, looking tiny against the backdrop of the city's skyline. With practiced fingers, she opened the folder. Inside weren't just resumes. There were handwritten notes, complex market analyses drawn on the back of diner placemats, and a meticulously organized budget plan for a struggling firm. "Mom says that a company is like a garden," Maya began, her voice gaining strength. "If you only look at the flowers, you miss the weeds eating the roots. She told me that your firm is spending too much on secondary acquisitions and not enough on core infrastructure." Marcus blinked. Those were the exact terms used in the confidential quarterly report he had just finished reading. "How does she know about our acquisitions?" "She reads the papers at the public library," Maya explained, "every day. She says you can learn anything if you're hungry enough, and we're very hungry." The honesty of the statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. He began flipping through the pages Maya presented. The girl wasn't just reciting lines. She understood the flow. She pointed to a graph her mother had hand-drawn. "She says here that if you change the way you handle the New Jersey logistics, you'll save 12% in the first year. She did the math while we were waiting for the bus. Marcus looked at the figures. They were brilliant. They were better than the projections his own team of analysts had provided. He looked at the girl, really looked at her. Her skin was pale and she looked thin, but her mind was clearly sharp. She had been her mother's shadow, learning the language of business while living in the shadows of the city. "Maya," Marcus said quietly. "Where is your mother exactly?" "St. Jude's public ward," she replied. "She got sick because our room at the shelter has a broken window. It's very cold at night. She gave me her coat and her last $5 for the subway to come here. She told me, 'Maya, just get the folder to Mr. Sterling. He's a fair man.'" Marcus flinched at the word fair. He wasn't known for being fair. He was known for being profitable, but looking at the stained, brilliant pages of Sarah Miller's work, he realized that he was looking at a talent that the world had discarded simply because it lacked a permanent address. Just then, his secretary, Elena, buzzed through the intercom. "Mr. Sterling, the board is waiting for the budget review. Shall I send in the next candidate?" Marcus looked at Maya. She was clutching the arms of the chair, her eyes wide with fear. Realizing her 5 minutes were up, she looked like she expected to be thrown out. "Elena," Marcus said into the intercom, "cancel the rest of the interviews and call my driver. Tell him to bring the car around to the front immediately." "Sir?" Elena sounded shocked. "But the candidates—" "Tell them the position has been tentatively filled," Marcus said firmly. He stood up and grabbed his charcoal overcoat. "Come on, Maya, we're going to the hospital." Maya's face lit up with a mixture of hope and terror. "Is she in trouble? Did I do it wrong?" "No," Marcus said, walking around the table and offering his hand to the small girl. "You did everything right. But if I'm going to hire your mother, I need to make sure she's healthy enough to start on Monday." As they walked through the lobby, the staff stared. The most powerful man in the building was holding the hand of a disheveled little girl. Marcus didn't care. For the first time in a decade, he wasn't thinking about the stock market. He was thinking about a woman who had analyzed a billion-dollar merger from a park bench. The ride to the hospital was silent. Maya stared out the window of the black Mercedes, her eyes reflecting the neon lights of Times Square. To Marcus, these were just advertisements. To Maya, they were symbols of a world that was always just out of reach. When they arrived at the public hospital, the contrast with Marcus's office was jarring. The air smelled of bleach and despair. People lined the hallways on gurneys, and the fluorescent lights flickered. Marcus felt a surge of guilt. He had donated millions to private clinics, but he had never stepped foot in a place like this. They found Sarah Miller in a crowded ward, separated from the others only by a thin yellow curtain. She looked frail, her skin almost translucent against the white sheets. An IV drip was connected to her arm, and her breathing was labored. When she saw Maya, her eyes widened in a flash of maternal panic. "Maya? What are you doing here? I told you to stay with Mrs. Gable at the shelter." "I went to the meeting, Mom," Maya said, rushing to the bedside. "I gave him the folder." Sarah's gaze shifted to the man standing behind her daughter. Even in her weakened state, she recognized him. She tried to sit up, a coughing fit racking her thin frame. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. She shouldn't have bothered you. I was desperate. Please don't hold it against her." Marcus stepped forward, pulling a chair to the side of the bed. "She didn't bother me, Sarah. She gave the best presentation I've heard in years." Sarah froze, her hand clutching Maya's. You read it?" "I read it. Your analysis of our logistics was better than my CFO's," Marcus admitted. "But why? Why are you here? Your resume says you were at the top of your class. You were a rising star at Goldman Sachs." Sarah looked down, her voice a whisper. "Life happens fast, Mr. Sterling. My husband died in a car accident 5 years ago. He was the one who handled our finances, and it turned out he had gambling debts I knew nothing about. We lost the house, the savings, everything. Then I got sick, lost my job, and without an address, no one would hire me. It's a circle you can't break. Once you're down, the world makes sure you stay there." Marcus looked at the woman. She wasn't a victim of laziness. She was a victim of a system that didn't know how to handle a streak of bad luck. He saw the intelligence still burning in her eyes, despite the fever. "The doctor says she needs 2 weeks of rest and proper nutrition," a nurse said, stepping behind the curtain. "But she's being discharged tomorrow because she doesn't have insurance." "She's not being discharged," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority that made CEOs tremble. "Transfer her to the private wing. Put it on my personal account. And I want a specialist to see her within the hour." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I can't pay you back, Marcus. Not yet." "You'll pay me back by being in my office at 9 a.m. 2 weeks from today," Marcus replied. "Consider this a signing bonus. Now, Maya, let's go find you some real food. Your mum needs to sleep." As Maya and Marcus walked toward the exit, Sarah watched them go. For the first time in 5 years, the crushing weight on her chest wasn't just the pneumonia, it was the sudden, terrifying lightness of hope. The next few days were a whirlwind for Maya. Marcus realized he couldn't leave a 7-year-old in a homeless shelter while her mother was in the hospital. Against his own better judgment and the frantic advice of his legal team, he brought Maya to his penthouse. Marcus lived in a world of minimalist grey and white. There were no toys, no crumbs, and certainly no laughter. Maya walked through the apartment as if she were in a museum, afraid to touch the velvet sofas or the glass sculptures. "You can sit down, Maya," Marcus said, feeling awkward. "Would you like some cocoa? My housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, can make some." "Is it okay if I sit on the floor?" Maya asked. "I don't want to get the chair dirty." Marcus felt a pang in his heart. "The chair can be cleaned. Sit." Over the next week, an unlikely bond began to form. Marcus, who had spent his life avoiding the distraction of a family, found himself tutoring Maya in math and listening to her stories about life on the streets. She told him how to find the best discarded books in the library bins and how to tell which subway performers were actually nice. She taught him about a New York he had never seen, the one that exists at eye level for a child who doesn't know where her next meal is coming from. One evening, while looking at the city lights, Maya asked, "Why are you helping us? People like you usually look through us like we're made of glass." Marcus was silent for a long time. "Maybe because I realized that I was the one who was made of glass, Maya. I had everything, but I was so fragile that a little bit of chaos scared me. Your mom, she's stronger than I am. To keep you safe and keep her mind sharp while having nothing, that's real power." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sarah was recovering rapidly. With the best medical care and the peace of mind knowing Maya was safe, her body finally began to heal, but she was terrified. She knew that the corporate world was a shark tank. Would Marcus really hire her once she was out, or was this just a temporary act of charity? She spent her days in the hospital bed with a laptop Marcus had sent over, catching up on 5 years of market changes. She wasn't just going to take the job, she was going to be the best employee he had ever seen. She had to be. For Maya. On the 10th day, Marcus brought Maya to the hospital. Sarah was standing by the window, dressed in a simple but elegant suit Marcus had arranged for her. She looked like the executive she was meant to be. "You look beautiful, Mom," Maya cried, throwing her arms around her. Sarah hugged her daughter tight, then looked at Marcus. "I'm ready," she said. "The car is waiting," Marcus replied. "But first, we have to stop by your new apartment. I took the liberty of securing a lease near the office. It's part of the relocation package." Sarah began to protest, but Marcus held up a hand. "It's an advance on your salary. You'll earn every penny, Sarah. I've seen your work. I'm not being nice. I'm being a businessman. And hiring you is the best business decision I've made in years." The transition wasn't easy. On Sarah's first day at Sterling & Associates, the whispers were deafening. The homeless Harvardite was the talk of the water cooler. People looked at her cheap shoes, the only ones she could afford to keep from her previous life, and smirked. But Marcus didn't shield her. He knew that if she was going to survive in this environment, she had to earn her respect. He gave her the most difficult project on his desk, the restructuring of a failing textile subsidiary in Ohio. Sarah worked 16-hour days. She was the first one in and the last one out. Maya would often do her homework in the break room, a quiet fixture that the other employees eventually began to accept. One afternoon, a senior partner named Julian, who had wanted his nephew to get Sarah's job, tried to embarrass her during a board meeting. "Mrs. Miller," Julian said snidely, "your projections are bold, but they lack, let's say, a connection to reality. Perhaps you're used to dealing with smaller, more informal budgets." The room went silent. Everyone knew he was referencing her time in the shelter. Sarah felt the heat rise to her face. She looked at Marcus, who remained expressionless, watching her. Sarah took a deep breath. She didn't crumble. She stood up, walked to the whiteboard, and began deconstructing Julian's own failed investments over the last 3 years. She showed with cold, hard logic how his traditional methods had cost the company $40 million in lost opportunities. "My experience with informal budgets, as you call them, taught me one thing, Julian," Sarah said, her voice like steel. "When you have nothing, you cannot afford to waste a single cent. I treat this company's money with the same desperation I treated my last $5. Can you say the same?" Julian turned red and sat down. Marcus allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to touch his lips. That night, Marcus, Sarah, and Maya had dinner together at a small Italian place around the corner from the office. It wasn't a fancy gala or a high-stakes business dinner. It was just 3 people sharing a meal. "You did well today," Marcus said. "I had a good teacher," Sarah replied, glancing at Maya. "She told me that when people try to make you feel small, it's usually because they're afraid you're actually bigger than them." "I learned that from the librarians," Maya chirped, her mouth full of spaghetti. As they walked out into the crisp evening air, Marcus realized that his life had changed. The silence of his penthouse no longer seemed peaceful. It seemed empty. He looked at Sarah, resilient, brilliant, and kind, and at Maya, the girl who had changed his world with a stained manila folder. He realized that he hadn't just saved them. They had saved him from a life of cold, calculated loneliness. The stability Sarah had fought so hard to achieve felt like a fragile glass house when the envelope arrived. It wasn't a standard corporate memo. It was a heavy, cream-colored packet from Vanguard Debt Recoveries. Inside was a nightmare she thought she had buried in the frozen dirt of her husband's grave. The documents claimed that the insolvency discharge Sarah had filed while living in the shelter was technically flawed. They were demanding $450,000, a combination of her late husband's gambling debts and astronomical interest. The threat was clear: pay within 10 days or they would file a public suit. In the cutthroat world of Manhattan finance, a fraud scandal was a death sentence. Sarah sat in her office, the panoramic view of the Hudson River blurring through her tears. She felt the ghost of the cold shelter air on her skin. She was terrified that Maya would have to trade her new school books for a subway pass and a cardboard box. When the door opened, she didn't even look up. "I can't do it, Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I thought I was out, but the hole is too deep." Marcus didn't speak at first. He walked to her desk and picked up the notice. He read it with the clinical eye of a man who had dismantled Fortune 500 companies. Then he did something Sarah didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but one of pure, predatory confidence. "They really picked the wrong woman to bully," Marcus said, leaning over the desk. "And they definitely picked the wrong firm to threaten. Sarah, look at me. When Maya walked into that meeting, she didn't just bring a resume. She brought a partner. You aren't fighting this alone." "But the tabloids, Marcus, the firm's reputation is built on my name," he interrupted. "And my name stands behind you. We aren't paying a cent. We're going to dismantle them." The following week was a war of attrition. Marcus didn't just hire a lawyer. He unleashed a team of forensic accountants. Sarah, fueled by a mixture of terror and maternal instinct, stayed up late every night. She used her intimate knowledge of her husband's shady dealings to find the thread that would unravel the debt collectors. They discovered that Vanguard wasn't a legitimate agency. It was a predatory shell company that specialized in zombie debt. Debts that were legally unenforceable, but used to blackmail people who had recently come into money. The morning of the hearing, the lobby of the courthouse was swarming with reporters. Julian, the partner who had always doubted Sarah, watched from the sidelines, waiting for her to fall. Instead, Sarah walked in with Marcus on one side and a team of the city's most elite lawyers on the other. In the courtroom, Sarah stood tall. She didn't hide her past. When the judge asked about her time in the shelter, she spoke with a dignity that silenced the room. "I spent 6 months without a roof over my head, Your Honor. I learned how to account for every penny, because every penny meant a meal for my daughter. If these men think they can use my poverty as a weapon, they have misunderstood the strength it gave me." The judge didn't just dismiss the case. He referred Vanguard to the district attorney for criminal extortion. The story broke that evening, but the narrative had shifted. It wasn't about a fraudster, it was about the steel phoenix of Sterling and Associates. That night, Marcus found Sarah on the office balcony. The city lights were reflecting in her eyes. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she corrected. "Thank you for not letting me quit." "I told you," Marcus smiled. "I'm a businessman, and I never let go of my most valuable assets." 12 months had passed since the legal battle, and the rhythm of life had shifted into something beautiful and steady. The New York winter was howling outside, rattling the windows of the brownstone Sarah and Maya now called home. It was a place of high ceilings, warm rugs, and a kitchen that always smelled of cinnamon and coffee. A far cry from the antiseptic smell of the St. Jude's public ward. Maya was thriving. She attended a prestigious academy where her teachers marveled at her unorthodox way of solving problems. She didn't just do the math. She understood the human cost of the numbers. She had become the heart of Marcus's life, the only person who could make the iron vault wear a ridiculous Santa hat. On Christmas Eve, the brownstone was glowing. Marcus had arrived with arms full of gifts, but he seemed uncharacteristically nervous. After dinner, as Maya was busy organizing her new chemistry set on the floor, Marcus led Sarah to the fireplace. "I spent 40 years building a wall around myself," Marcus began, his voice low. "I thought success was a number. I thought power was being able to say no to everyone, but Maya taught me that power is actually the ability to say yes when the rest of the world says no." He handed her a small, velvet-lined box. When Sarah opened it, she expected a diamond. Instead, she found a heavy silver key engraved with the initials S&M. "The Sarah and Maya Foundation," Marcus explained, his eyes searching hers. "I've transferred $20 million into an endowment. Its mission is to find the people the system has discarded, the geniuses in the shelters, the mothers who are one paycheck away from the street. I want you to run it, Sarah. I want you to be the person you needed 3 years ago." Sarah couldn't speak. She looked at the key, then at Maya, who had stopped playing and was watching them with a wise, knowing smile. "You're giving me the chance to change the system?" Sarah whispered. "No," Marcus said, taking her hand. "I'm giving the system the chance to be changed by you. I've realized that my wealth was just sitting there dormant. You and Maya are the ones who brought it to life." "Is this our Christmas miracle?" Maya asked, stepping between them and taking both their hands. "No, Maya," Sarah said, pulling her daughter close. "Miracles are things that just happen. This is something we built. This is a foundation." As the snow began to blanket the Upper West Side, the three of them stood by the window. For the first time in her life, Sarah Miller wasn't looking for an exit or a way to survive. She was looking at a future she had earned, supported by a man who had learned that the most profitable thing he could ever invest in was a child with a folder and a mother with a dream. The launch of the foundation wasn't a gala event with champagne and tuxedos. Instead, Sarah chose to hold the inaugural recruitment day at a public library in Queens. She wanted to go to where the struggle was real, where the smell of old paper and the hum of street traffic provided the soundtrack for survival. The news of the homeless VP had become legendary in the city's shelters. When Sarah walked into the library, there was a line of people stretching around the block, shivering in the biting Atlantic wind. They weren't there for a handout. They were there for a chance to be seen. Sarah sat at a simple wooden table, much like the one Maya had sat at years ago. The air was thick with the scent of damp wool and anxiety. One of the first people she met was Elias, a man in his 50s with weathered hands and a notebook full of complex structural blueprints. "I was a lead engineer in Detroit," Elias told her, his voice trembling as he avoided eye contact. "Lost my wife to cancer. The bills took the house. Then the depression took my job. Now I design bridges in my head while I sleep on the A-train. I have the solutions for the BQE congestion, but nobody listens to a man who smells like the subway." Sarah looked at his drawings. They were flawless, rendered with a precision that bypassed the limitations of his tattered paper. These aren't just bridges, Elias. These are solutions for urban congestion that the city hasn't even thought of yet. You've accounted for the thermal expansion in a way my own contractors missed. She paused, looking him in the eye. Come to my office on Monday. We're going to get you a suit, a desk, and a consulting contract with the city planning department. We'll provide a hotel voucher for the weekend so you can rest. Elias broke down in tears, his shoulders finally dropping the weight of years of invisibility. Why are you doing this? I'm a ghost. Because a girl in a denim jacket once told me that the world is a garden, Sarah replied softly. And we've been letting the best flowers wilt for too long because we were too busy looking at the fence. Over the next 6 months, the ripple effect began to transform the corporate culture of New York. It wasn't an easy transition. Marcus faced immense pressure from the board. They argued that hiring unvetted individuals from the streets was a liability. Julian, still stinging from his previous defeat, tried to lobby the shareholders to impose a traditional experience clause in the bylaws. Marcus didn't flinch. Inspired by Sarah's success, he introduced the Sterling method at his firm. He removed the requirement for a home address on initial applications, realizing that no address was the ultimate trap. He created a life bridge fund that provided temporary housing for new hires, recognizing that a person cannot focus on spreadsheets if they don't know where they will sleep. The results were staggering. Employee retention hit an all-time high. The foundation grads, as they were called, worked with a ferocity and loyalty that Ivy League recruits couldn't match. They knew the value of the chair they sat in because they remembered the hardness of the pavement. One evening, Marcus and Sarah were featured on 60 Minutes. The interviewer, a veteran journalist known for his skepticism, asked Marcus how it felt to be the pioneer of human-centric capitalism. Marcus looked at Sarah, then at the camera. I'm not a pioneer. I was a man who was blind to his own surroundings. I was walking past brilliance every day on my way to the office, stepping over the very talent that could have saved my company. It took a 7-year-old girl walking into my boardroom to show me that the greatest untapped resource in America isn't oil or technology. It's the people we've decided to stop seeing because their struggle makes us uncomfortable. The interview went viral. Across the country, other CFOs began to look at their hiring practices. The Sarah and Maya model started popping up in Chicago, Los Angeles, and London. A single act of courage from a child had started a global conversation about the worth of a human being. Maya's 10th birthday approached, and the social elite of New York expected a lavish party at the Plaza or the Pierre. They sent gifts, designer clothes, expensive jewelry, even a miniature electric car. But Maya kept them all in their boxes in the corner of her room. "Mom, I don't want a party at a hotel," Maya said one evening while they were looking at the city lights from their brownstone. The Empire State Building was lit in blue and white. "I want to go back to the 42nd floor. I want to show the kids from the shelter that the big glass building isn't a monster. It's a door that's finally unlocked." On the day of her birthday, Marcus transformed the Sterling & Associates headquarters. The sterile, cold conference rooms, usually the site of high-stakes mergers and ruthless negotiations, were filled with the smell of pizza, burgers, and birthday cake. The mahogany tables were covered in craft paper and crayons. 50 children from the city's most crowded shelters were bussed in. They arrived with the same look Maya once had, shoulders hunched, eyes wary, hands clutching the straps of worn-out backpacks. Marcus, the man who used to fire people for having a stray coffee cup on their desk, was on his hands and knees on the carpet, helping a 5-year-old named Leo build a skyscraper out of Legos. "You have to reinforce the base, Leo," Marcus said, his voice gentle. "If the foundation is strong, the wind can't knock it down, just like people." Maya was everywhere. She talked to the older kids about their schoolwork, encouraging them to join the foundation's tech club. She told the younger ones stories about how she used to hide books under her sweater so she could read them by the flickering streetlights of the Bronx. "You see that chair?" Maya said, pointing to Marcus's massive leather seat at the head of the boardroom table. "I sat in that when I was 7. I was scared I'd get it dirty. I was scared the security guard would see my sneakers. But you know what? It's just a chair. The person sitting in it is what matters. And one day, one of you is going to sit there and make things better for the next group of kids. Don't let the glass walls make you feel small. They're just windows to the future. The Iron Vault watched his daughter from across the room. He saw the way she looked at the children, not with pity, but with a fierce sisterly pride. She wasn't a princess in a castle. She was a leader in her element. "She's the best thing that ever happened to this company," Marcus whispered to Sarah, his eyes misty. "She's the best thing that ever happened to this world," Sarah replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "She taught us that the most important meeting isn't the one where you make money, but the one where you make a difference." As the party ended, each child was given a success kit, a high-end laptop, a sturdy backpack, and a card with the direct number to the Sarah and Maya Foundation. It wasn't just a gift. It was a lifeline, a tangible sign that the city hadn't forgotten them. Late that night, after the last child had left and the cleaning crews had cleared the crumbs of cake, Marcus took Sarah and Maya to his private office. He turned on a single lamp, illuminating a gold frame on the wall. Inside was the original, tattered, coffee-stained manila folder. "I keep this here to remind me," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every time a consultant tells me to cut costs by firing people, or every time a lawyer tells me to take the easy way out, I look at this folder. I ask myself, what would the girl who carried this folder think of this choice? Would she find it fair?" Maya touched the glass of the frame, her small hand covering the spot where her mother's name was written. "I was so scared that day, Marcus. My stomach was in knots. I thought you were going to call the police or the social workers." "I was scared too, Maya," Marcus confessed, his hand resting on her shoulder. "I was scared that if I listened to you, my whole world would change. I was scared that my cold, perfect life would be ruined by reality. And thank God it did. You didn't just save your mum that day. You saved me from becoming a man who died with a full bank account and an empty heart." The wedding took place on a crisp October afternoon in Central Park. The leaves were a riot of gold and crimson, echoing the colors of the folder that had started it all. It wasn't a celebrity wedding, though the guest list included the most powerful people in the city, from the mayor to the heads of the major banks. The front row was occupied by people who represented the true soul of the city: Elias the engineer, the nurse from St. Jude's who had snuck Sarah extra blankets, and several of the foundation grads who were now managers and directors. It was a celebration of a community built on the rubble of broken dreams. Maya stood as the maid of honor, her eyes bright with joy. She wore a simple white dress, and in her hand she carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that grow in the cracks of the New York sidewalks, stubborn and beautiful. When it was time for the vows, the park grew silent. The only sound was the distant hum of the city that had once been so cruel to Sarah and was now her sanctuary. The Bethesda fountain sparkled in the background, a symbol of healing. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice steady but full of raw feeling. "I spent my life calculating risk. I thought I could predict every outcome, but I never realized that the biggest risk of all was living a life without love. You showed me that a person's true net worth isn't measured in a bank account, but in the number of people they lift up. I promise to be your partner, your protector, and a father to the girl who had the courage to tell me I was wrong." Sarah took a deep breath, looking at the man who had seen her brilliance when she was at her lowest point. "Marcus, I came to you with a folder and a prayer. I didn't think I had anything left to give this world. But you didn't just give me a job. You gave me back my dignity. You taught me that it's okay to lean on someone, that strength isn't just about standing alone, but about standing together. I promise to stand by you, to build our foundation together, and to never forget the view from the bottom so we can always look up." As they kissed, the crowd erupted into a standing ovation. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a victory lap for the human spirit. The reception was held at a small family-owned restaurant near the office, the same one where they had their first dinner when Maya was still wearing her oversized denim jacket. As the night wound down and the stars came out over the skyline, Maya slipped away. She walked back to the Sterling and Associates building. Security let her in with a smile. They all knew the girl who owned the 42nd floor. She took the elevator up in silence. She walked into the boardroom and sat in the CFO's chair one last time as a child. The The city lights stretched out before her, like a sea of diamonds. She saw the shelters, the hospitals, the skyscrapers, and the parks. She knew that there were other Mayas out there tonight, clutching folders and hoping for a miracle. "We're coming for you," Maya whispered to the night sky, her breath fogging the glass. "We're going to open the doors. We're going to make sure the garden grows." Marcus and Sarah found her there, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. They didn't tell her to get down. They didn't tell her it was late or that the party was over. They simply stood behind her, their shadows merging into one on the polished floor. The iron vault was gone, replaced by a man of empathy. The homeless girl was a memory of strength. What remained was a family, a modern fairy tale written in the heart of the world's toughest city, proving that while life can be cold and realistic, it is also capable of extraordinary human-made miracles when someone finally decides to listen.